Unicorn Tapestry by Suzy McKee Charnas. Hold on, Floria said. I know what we're going to say. I agree not to take any new clients for a while. But wait till I tell you. You're not going to believe this. First phone call, setting up an initial appointment, he comes out with what his problem is. I seem to have fallen victim to a delusion of being a vampire. Christ H. God, cried Lucille delightfully. Just like that, over the telephone? When I recovered my aplomb, so to speak, I told him that I preferred to wait with the details until our first meeting, which is tomorrow. They were sitting on the tiny terrace outside the staff room of the clinic, a converted townhouse on the Upper West Side. Floria spent 3 days a week here and the remaining 2 in her office on Central Park South, where she saw private clients like this one. Lucille, always gratifyingly responsive, was Floria's most valued professional friend. Clearly enchanted with Floria's news, she sat eagerly forward in her chair, eyes wide behind Coke bottle lenses. She said, "Do you suppose he thinks he's a revived corpse?" Below, down at the end of the street, Floria could see 2 kids skidding their skateboards near a man who wore a woolen cap and a heavy coat despite the May warmth. He was leaning against a wall. He had been there when Floria had arrived at the clinic this morning. If corpses walked, some, not nearly revived enough, stood in plain view in New York. "I'll have to think of a delicate way to ask," she said. "How did he come to you, this vampire?" He was working in an upstate college, teaching and doing research, and all of a sudden he just disappeared, vanished, literally, without a trace. A month later he turned up here in the city. The faculty dean at the school knows me and sent him to see me. Lucille gave her a shy look. "So you thought, aha, do a little favor for a friend. This looks classic and easy to transfer if need be. Repressed intellectual blows, stack, and runs off with Spacey's chick." Something like that. "You know me too well," Floria said with a rueful smile. "Huh," grunted Lucille. She sipped ginger ale from a chipped white mug. I don't take panicky middle-aged men anymore. They're too depressing. And you shouldn't be taking this one, intriguing as he sounds." "Here comes the lecture," Floria told herself. Lucille got up. She was short, heavy, prone to wearing loose garments that swung about her like ceremonial robes. As she paced, her hem brushed at the flowers, staring up at the planted bones that rimmed the little terrace. "You know damn well this is just more overwork you're loading on. Don't take this guy, refer him." Floria sighed. I know. I promised everybody I'd slow down. But you said it yourself just a minute ago. It looked like a simple favor. So what do I get? Count Dracula, for God's sake. Would you give that up?" Fishing around in one capacious pocket, Lucille brought out a dented pack of cigarettes and lit up, scowling. "You know, when you give me advice, I try to take it seriously. Joking aside, Floria, what am I supposed to say? I've listened to your moaning for months now, and I thought we'd figured out that what you need is to shed some pressure, to start saying no. And here you are insisting on a new case. You know what I think? You're hiding in other people's problems from a lot of your own stuff that you should be working on." Okay, don't glare at me. Be pig-headed. Have you gotten rid of Chubbs, but at least?" This was Floria's code name for a troublesome client named Kenny, whom she'd been trying to unload for some time. Floria shook her head. "What gives with you? It's weeks since you swore you dumped him. Trying to do everything for everybody is wearing you out. I bet you're still dropping weight. Judging by the very unbecoming circles under your eyes, sleeping isn't going too well either. Still no dreams you can remember?" "Lucille, don't nag. I don't want to talk about my health." "Well, what about his health? Dracula's?" Did you suggest that he have a physical before seeing you? There might be some psychological. You're not going to be able to whisk him off to an MD and out of my hands, Floria said wryly. He told me on the phone that he wouldn't consider either medication or hospitalization. Involuntarily, she glanced down at the end of the street. The wooden-capped man had curled up on the sidewalk at the floor of the building, sleeping on passed out or dead. The city was tottering with sickness. Compared with that wreck down there and others like him, how sick could this vampire be, with his cultured, baritone voice, his self-possessed approach? And you won't consider handing him off to somebody else, Lucille said. Well, not until I know a little more. Come on, Luce. Would you want at least to know what he looks like? Lucille stubbed out her cigarette against the low parapet. Down below, a policeman strolled along the street, ticketing the parked cars. He didn't even look at the man lying at the corner of the building. They watched his progress without comment. Finally, Lucille said, well, if you won't drop Dracula, keep me posted on him, will you? He entered the office on the dot of the hour, a gaunt but graceful figure. He was impressive. Wiry gray hair, worn shirt, emphasized the massiveness of his face with its long jaw, high cheekbones and granite cheeks grooved as if by winters of hard weather. His name, typed in caps on the initial information sheet that Floria proceeded to fill out with him, was Edward Lewis Wyland. Crisply, he told her about the background of the vampire incident, describing in caustic terms his life at Caslin College, the pressures of collegial competition, interdepartmental squabbles, student indifference, administrative bungling. History had limited use, she knew, since memory distorts. Still, if he felt most comfortable establishing the setting for his illness, that was as good a way to start off as any. At length, his energy faltered. His angular body sank into a slump. His voice became flat and tired as he haltingly worked up to the crucial evidence. Night work at the sleep lab, fantasies of blood drinking as he watched the youthful subjects of his dream research slumbering. Finally, an attempt to act out the fantasy with a staff member at the college. He'd been repulsed, then panic had assailed him. Word would get out, he'd be fired, blacklisted forever. He'd bolted. A nightmare period had followed. He offered no details. When he had come to his senses, he'd seen that just what he'd feared, the ruin of his career, would come from his running away. So he'd phoned the dean, and now here he was. Throughout this recital, she watched him diminish from the dignified academic who had entered her office to a shamed and frightened man hunched in his chair, his hands pulled fitfully at each side. "What are your hands doing?" she said gently. He looked blank. She repeated the question. He looked down at his hands. "Struggling," he said. "With what?" "The worst," he muttered. "I haven't told you the worst." She had never grown hardened to this sort of transformation. His long fingers busied themselves fiddling with a button on his jacket while he explained painfully that the object of his attack at Carsland had been a woman. Not young, but handsome and vital. She had first caught his attention earlier in the year during a Festschrift, an honorary seminar for a retiring professor. A picture emerged of an awkward Wayland, lifelong bachelor, seeking this woman's warmth and suffering her refusal. Floria knew she should bring him out of the past and into her here and now. But he was doing so beautifully on his own that she was loath to interrupt. "Did I tell you there was a rapist active on the campus at this time?" he said bitterly. "I borrowed a leaf from his book. I tried to take from this woman, since she wouldn't give. I tried to take some of her blood." He stared at the floor. "What does that mean, to take someone's blood? What do you think it means?" The button, pulled and twisted by his fretful fingers, came off. He put it into his pocket, the impulse, she guessed, of a fastidious nature. Her energy, he muttered, stolen to warmth, the aging scholar, the walking corpse, the vampire, myself. His silence, his downcast eyes, his bent shoulders, all signaled a man brought to bay by a life crisis. Perhaps he was going to be the kind of client therapists dream of, and she needed so badly these days. A client intelligent and sensitive enough, given the companionship of a professional listener, to swiftly unravel his own mental tangles. Exhilarated by his promising start, Floria restrained herself from trying to build on it too soon. She made herself tolerate the silence, which lasted until he said suddenly, "I notice that you make no notes as we speak. Do you record these sessions on tape?" A hint of paranoia, she thought, not unusual. "Not without your knowledge and consent, just so I won't send for your personnel file from Caseland College without your knowledge and consent. I do, however, write notes after each session as a guide to myself and in order to have a record in case of any confusion about anything we do or say here. I can promise you that I won't show my notes or speak of you by name to anyone, except Dean Sharp at Caseland, of course, and even then only as much as is strictly necessary, without your written permission. Does that satisfy you?" "I apologize for my question," he said. "The incident has left me very nervous, a condition that I hope to get over with your help." The time was up. When he had gone, she stepped outside to check with Hilda, the receptionist she shared with 4 other therapists here at the Central Park South office. Hilda always sized up new clients in the waiting room. Of this one, she said, "Are you sure there's anything wrong with that guy? I think I'm in love."